Alright everyone, I decided to knock the most important video that most people probably care about here out first before going into a little bit of other news today. And that's the Julius Caesar play disruption that happened a couple of days ago with Loomer and Posobiec, I want to say his name is pronounced, I'm not exactly sure. So this has caused quite a bit of fury. Long story short, again, try to summarize it for people who don't know what happened. You have the New York City Julius Caesar play, where they depict a fairly Trump-like looking character getting stabbed by a bunch of senators. It fits in, you know, with the Julius Caesar Shakespearean play in general, but the imagery used was a little bit provoking, I think, for some leftists. Now, what happened is that people who don't like leftist violence showed up and decided to disrupt its final performance there, shouting, "The blood of Steve Scalise is on your hands," and Goebbels would be proud and stuff like that. So I've got to weigh in with my thoughts here. On one end, I can understand those, and this is coming from some on the right as well. I can understand those who say, well, this is just a fucking public theater performance. You're acting like the left when you go and disrupt these public events. That's very much true. I also understand others who are saying, yes, but the left does this constantly. Anytime someone shows up to give a totally innocuous speech, like you have even somebody who's basically a neocon, somebody like Ben Shapiro, or maybe someone who's sort of a hybrid between the neocons and the new right, like Milo, they show up to give a speech, and what happens? Almost every single time, especially if it's on a college campus, what happens? Antifa shows up, other protesters show up, they try to either disrupt the speech and shout them down, or they start burning things and throwing rocks. So I understand those who say, well, you know, it's a little bit hypocritical, because the left is like, they're condemning this disruption, and yet every time somebody who's not on the left speaks, there's a disruption. And shame on these other right-wingers for not noticing that, not pointing that out. But I've got to point out my own opinion here. And my own opinion is that I don't agree with disrupting events like this. There's no actual call to violence in the Shakespearean performance that's being put on play here in New York City. That is, having a Trump-like character you could look at it just as a larger symbolism of, well, he happens to be the president, thus a symbol of that Caesar-like power. I guess it's a statement about imperial presidencies or something. Disrupting it doesn't do well for a social movement that thrives on simply trying to shout down or disrupt the activities of some imagined other side. Usually doesn't, it just doesn't work that way. Civil disobedience, I suppose, aside, you know, trying to cast off someone who's alt-right is like being like Martin Luther King. I'm not sure that's exactly going to work with the centrists in the country. But nobody condemning that disruption appeared to even remark upon the fact of the massive hypocrisy involved, which is coming from the corporate media, it's coming from some in the alt media, it's even coming from other people on the right, in not pointing out that there was a golden opportunity wasted by many of these people to say, yes, but the left does this constantly, number one. Number two, this isn't even violent, it's just a routine disruption. They're not throwing rocks up on stage. They're not throwing Molotov cocktails. They're simply disrupting the performance and shouting a few slogans before the police get involved. And I think the additional layer of hypocrisy that I saw is that the police did get involved. You have a crowd of far leftists that show up on a college campus at some privately owned function, it doesn't really matter, to give their thoughts. You have somebody, again, it can be a conservative neocon, or it can be someone way out there on the alt-right. They show up to give a speech, and almost invariably there's violence. When there's no violence, there's at least heavy-handed disruption on a mass scale, and nobody does anything about it. The police may or may not even show up. Private security may or may not perform its function under those circumstances. You're more likely to get a situation where the college or the other venue involved simply shuts everything down. And yet you have a couple of people disrupting a theater performance They're not being violent. They're not throwing rocks. They're not organizing some massive rally to go beat on people in the crowd. And everybody goes haywire and acts like it's some terrible, horrible thing. And that's the hypocrisy I see. It's coming from people on the center right, from the neocons and so forth. It's coming from the alt-right. It's certainly coming from the left, both in the neoliberal left and the far left. And then you get this term. This is really funny. People like Shapiro and others have now begun to use the term snowflake to describe the alt-right, when the original use of that, I don't know if they realize this, every time they use that, what they're actually calling to mind is the far left, because that's the original usage of that term, to denote people that were easily triggered. But we're talking about two vaguely separate situations, both in the symbolism, I think, what's being said or done, and in the actions of those taking part in such disruptions. Here you have a few people disrupting a play. They're not being violent while doing it, while the play is at least invoking violent imagery that's loosely related to Donald Trump. You can understand why someone who really likes Trump, thus, would be mildly upset at this. It's sort of like the Kathy Griffin thing. On the other hand, when you have leftist violence associated with these things, what you're getting is that the people who have been triggered, the social justice warriors, the snowflakes, whatever you wish to term them, they've been triggered by speech which itself is not violent, by people that are not acting in a violent manner, using no violent imagery, and saying nothing that's really that off the wall, and all you have to do is listen to some of these public speeches that they're giving, you'll see the same thing. They're saying, oh yeah, we want like a sovereign nation and stuff. It's not violent. It's not white nationalism after a sort of a Goebbels brand, and interestingly, they're invoking Goebbels here. By the way, never invoke Nazi stuff, because that makes you lose the argument immediately. That's way, way old hat. It doesn't work anymore. That level of propaganda has been run into the ground so much it doesn't work. And then the people who show up to disrupt, in those cases, who are attempting to disrupt something, all it is somebody saying, yeah, I'm on the right, I want lower taxes or whatever. Oh, fascism. They start throwing rocks and starting fires. There's a huge differential between these two things. I guess the worry among some is that you're going to get antagonistic elements on the right that will attempt to disrupt things. They'll basically devolve into doing exactly what Antifa does or something like that. But then again, can you really blame people for wanting to do this? Like when a group of people, when a group of protesters who are right-wing show up, can you blame them for trying to defend themselves, for example? What, they're supposed to sit there and be pacifists and just get beaten on or something like that? Can you blame people who think, well, you know, not disrupting leftist groups, even though I'm not sure that a Shakespearean play really, really counts. I think it's the imagery involved causes people to believe it must be far left. It's just Shakespeare. It's an age-old story. You know, regrettable as the symbolism there may be. Those people, they're like, well, we've spent decades not antagonizing the left, and it doesn't seem to have worked because they're still there spewing their crap. We still get treated differently whenever we do show up to protests. Like the police will go around and arrest us for defending ourselves. Why don't we try just simply using the same tactics? I think that's a mistake, but it's understandable why people would think that that was a decent idea, because they see no progress being made. I think a lot of these people, they look around and they say, well, Antifa still throws rocks and Molotov cocktails all the time. Nobody seems to be willing to stop them. Maybe we should take up the same tactics. Big mistake, ideologically speaking, big mistake strategically speaking, but I can kind of understand where they're coming from at the very least, because they see the hypocrisy. And that's what I see. It's a humorous form of hypocrisy here. I can understand everyone who's weighing in on it. I don't believe in disrupting these events. If it's somebody who's calling, if it's somebody, it's like a Sarsour or somebody like that. They're saying, oh, well, cut off women's clitorises, and we need Sharia in the U.S., we need more diversity, more displacement, or something like that. Or we need to beat white men down because there's a... Yeah, okay, well, maybe disruption could be called for. That could be kind of funny. This is just a public play, though. I'm not sure why this became sort of a standard-bearing, rallying call for all of these different people. It's a fucking Shakespearean play. It doesn't matter if the actor depicting Caesar looks vaguely like Donald Trump. Is it regrettable? Maybe so. Is it kind of conspicuous? Yeah, I think they meant to do that. But it's not like it spawns... If the left wants to get violent, they're going to get violent because the corporate media tells them every day that Trump is a fascist, not because they saw a Shakespeare play. They're going to get violent because they're hearing legions of Nazis are rising up to lynch all you people. Doesn't that make you scared? Doesn't that make you mad? Don't you want to take your country back from the evil, spooky dooky nationalists or something like that? That's what's going to cause violence. It's not going to be caused by a Shakespearean play. That's just something, people go there and they see a half-assed rendition of Caesar. I prefer, in all honesty, when I'm talking about Shakespeare or anything, I prefer it to be much more traditional in the way it's brought forth. And the way that it's acted out should be traditional, like people should be in period clothing, from like the Renaissance or something like that. That's when it's good. I've seen Shakespearean performances before, and performances, you know, everything from school plays up through the more professional side of some, like the Odyssey or the Iliad or something like that. And some of them are better than others, in all honesty. I saw a play once. I think it was the Odyssey. And there were only like 5 actual, no, it was Macbeth. I saw this one time. It was a semi-professional sort of local theater performance. They only had like 5 or 6 people playing all of the different roles, and they sort of really quickly threw on different clothing to depict these characters. Actually, I kind of liked it in that very stripped-down, bare-bones sense. I thought it was pretty good, actually, considering the extreme low-budget nature of this, albeit semi-professional performance. But then again, I've seen, like, you know, back when I was in school, you'd go and see plays that they had the Odyssey or whatever. I thought that was pretty good. Although, you know, I haven't seen it in 20 years, so it might not stand up to modern technical standards. That's about all. Peace out.